Hello everyone, welcome back to another YouTube video. My name is Daniel, and it's been quite a while since I last uploaded. I took a short break there because of school and things, and now we're back. So as the first game back, so here's a game I played against the 2400 actually, and I was playing the white pieces, I was playing the black pieces, and let's take a look at what happened. So we opened with e4, c5, the Sicilian, close Sicilian with the move knight c3, knight c6, g3, common move. Idea is to go bishop g2, and then you can put the knight on e2 or put the knight on f3 and then try to play like f4 and be very aggressive. So I played d6, bishop g2, knight f6, d3, g6, knight f3, bishop g7, castles, bishop to d2, and here I play the move bishop to g4. The idea with this is that I'm firstly pinning the knight towards the queen. So now, secondly, my threat is to play knight to d4, putting more pressure on this knight, and then basically freezing white's bishop here on g2 and the queen on d1, since white's knight here on f3 needs a lot more defense. So h3, bishop takes, queen takes, and here I play knight to d4, attacking the queen on f3 as well as the pawn on c2. So queen to d1 is necessary here to defend the c2 pawn, and here I play the move e5, basically consolidating this knight in the center of the board here on d4, and making this knight basically a permanent anchor in white's position. And whenever it gets traded, which you'll see later on in the game, then I'll always have a pawn here to replace it, which will always kind of be a thorn for white. So knight to d5, knight takes, pawn takes. Here I play the move f5, just gaining space. I'm also thinking of like f4 potentially at some point, and then maybe pushing f3, or even a move like e4. c3 here, I play knight to b5. My idea is probably to go knight c7 and then play the move b5 at some point to expand in the center as well as on the king side and queen side. So a4, knight back to c7, and here my opponent plays the move b4 here. I very calmly play the move b6 because I realize that I have a space advantage here on the king side. So if my opponent plays a move like b5 to lock up the queen side here, then I can always play a move like queen f6, g5, and f4 and try to pursue some type of king side attack. Keep in mind I also have this bishop here on g7, so if white ever commits to the move c4, at some moment I can even play the move e4, create a forward attack on this rook, and then maybe the move e4 can generate some counterplay. Instead, my opponent takes. I take with the b pawn, opening up the b file. If I take with the d pawn, then this allows the move d6 here, which could get a bit annoying. However, there is enough compensation here, but it still gets a bit annoying because I am down the exchange. There is a weak pawn here on d3, which I can target with rook d8 and probably take on d3 next. But still, there's still some complications here. And, well, there's chances for both sides, but practically speaking, I feel like white is a bit better. Instead, so after pawn takes, I play b takes. And here rook b1, taking control of the open file. I play rook b8, doing the same. And here rook takes and queen takes was played. Here, I thought initially my opponent would play something different. Let's say like the move c4, for example, because you'll realize that after rook takes and queen takes, I get full control of this open file, and at some point I can probably infiltrate with my queen somewhere, and probably even double up on the b file with my rook as well. However, after a move like c4, white doesn't lose control of this open file, and alternatively, if I play rook takes and queen takes, white is probably for choice here after queen b8. Here they can probably play a move like bishop to e3, and then if ever I take, then here you'll see that white has control of the open file, and it's a lot more passive for black and a lot more difficult to defend. Which is why rook takes b8 kind of shocked me. But anyways, queen takes b8, rook to e8, rook to e1 here, trying to target this e5 pawn, which makes sense with a move like f4 potentially at some point. Here I play queen to b2, getting my queen into white's camp here and trying to target some weak pawns here. My opponent plays the move c4, and this I believe was a bit of an inaccuracy, and the computer agrees. The reason is because when the pawn was on c3, this prevented the very natural square for the knight or the rook, which is the b4 square. However, after the move pawn to c4, now I have the move knight a6, and the idea here is to very simply go knight to b4 and target this weak pawn here on d3. I can also bring my rook to b8 and then bring my rook into b3 before I do that, so that I have even more pressure here with the rook as well as the knight attacking the d3 pawn. Not to mention I still have my queen in the position. Here, bishop to g5. Idea is to go bishop to e7 to try to fork the d6 pawn as well as the rook on f8 here. So I very calmly just prevent this by playing the move bishop f6. My bishop on g7 wasn't doing anything in the first place, so trading off my opponent's dark square bishop here on g5, which is actively creating a threat, for my dark square bishop, which actually isn't doing anything particularly, is a good trade for me, because then you'll notice white's pieces are still very passive. This bishop here on g2 is still stuck behind the d5 pawn, which will never actually move. And this rook and this queen are also very passive, because especially I have the move rook b1, rook b8 at some point, and I can also even drop my knight into not b3, into b4 to target d3. So here bishop to c1 was played. I very calmly slide out of the way, queen c3. Here bishop f1 was played to provide more defense to the d3 pawn. And so now you'll see that black is definitely better here. Black is definitely for choice, because if you look at white's pieces, they are literally all stuck on the first rank, all 5 of them, including the king. Whereas black's pieces are a lot more active. This bishop isn't doing much, but that's okay, because it's stuck on the king side. This rook is ready to infiltrate at some point to b3 or b1. This knight is ready to jump into b4. This queen on c3 is very active and is posing a lot of problems for white. So you can tell that black is clearly better here. I play rook b8. I used to maybe go rook b1 or even rook to b3 to target d3, and then I can jump my knight in. Here bishop d2 was played. I very simply play queen to b2, doubling up on the b file here. Here my opponent plays bishop to e3, and here I bring my rook all the way into b3. Not the best choice that the computer says. Best would be the move queen to b3, trading off the queens, and then I can generate even more pressure without the queen being around to defend white's weak points. Instead here I play rook b3. My idea is to play knight b4 on the next move to target the b3 pawn. And then I can also play like a move like queen a3 to pick up the a4 pawn, and also as well simultaneously attack the d3 pawn. Queen to e2. Here I very simply play queen to a3. This wasn't the best choice. Queen captures on e2 was better. The idea is that if rook captures on e2, then very simply rook captures on d3, and I win a pawn here. Or even a move like knight to b4 to delay it, because after rook captures on d3, there is a move like rook to b2, taking control of the open file. So I would be able to win a pawn there. And if bishop captures on e2, then here I can simply jump my knight into b4. And if you play a move like rook d1 to defend this pawn, then I can simply play rook a3. And the knight on b4 does a really good job of blocking the open file for black, whereas my rook is already infiltrated, so it's not really too much of a concern if my rook is not able to get in, because it's already in here. And bishop d2 to dislodge this knight, then I would very simply play move a5, and this knight isn't going anywhere. Pawn takes, let's say. This is an ideal scenario here, and then I can pick up the a4 pawn on the next move. Instead in the game, however, I played the move queen to a3, targeting the a4 pawn, as well as preparing knight to b4 to take the d3 pawn. Here h4 was played, trying to generate some counterplay with h5. However, here I very simply just capture on a4. Better here would actually just to play knight to b4 to attack this d3 pawn. However, I wanted to cash in immediately, so queen captures on a4. Queen to d1. Here I play the move knight to b4 targeting d3, and preparing the move a5 because I am up this extra pawn here, so I want to push it down the board. h5, I very simply slide out of the way. I'm not really worried about the king side here, because after takes, which happened in the game, the queen has no infiltration squares. Both of them are taken. This bishop is eyeing nothing, and this rook, well, it's really passive, and this bishop is also very passive, defending the d3 pawn. So here bishop to c1, attacking my queen, so I don't have time to play knight takes d3. Here I very simply play queen to a2. Any other square would be not as great, like if I play a move like queen to a4. Here my opponent has the move g4 here, lashing out on the king side. And if I play a move like f5, then my opponent even has the move g5, and after bishop takes g5 and queen to g4, black is no longer actually better. In fact, black is actually the side that has to watch out for any potential threats, mainly because, well, black's queen is going to get in and start taking some pawns potentially. So it's very important that I don't allow this to happen. And queen to a2, there is no g4 here, because here I would simply have the move bishop to h4, which is the reason why queen a2 is better, because I'm attacking the f2 pawn. And if you play a move like rook d2, then I can very simply play the move queen to b1, and you'll see that this g4 pawn is no longer protected by the queen because it's blocked by the rook on e2. And so now my position is a lot more safer if takes. or sorry, not takes, takes. Here, if takes, then I would very simply play queen to captures on d3, winning this pawn here on d3, and black's position is completely dominating and winning. So here after queen h2, my opponent plays bishop to d3. I very simply play the move a5, playing ready for a4, a3, etc. Here, queen to a1, I very simply play the move a4, getting closer to my goal. Queen takes and knight takes, and here rook to a1. And here I was debating between, in the game I was debating between rook b2 as well as knight to c3. In the end, I decided on the move knight to c3 because I thought after rook to b2, because I want to open up this diagonal at some point. I know that. And whenever I move this knight, I have to move it to c3 to defend this a3 pawn, a4 pawn. And I realized that if I bring my rook to b2, then I'll have two pieces in the way of opening up this diagonal. Well, three with the e4 pawn. Whereas alternatively, if I play knight c3, then I only have two pieces in the way. And whenever e4 comes, this will have the threat of knight to e2 check, picking up the rook in the corner. Also, knight c3 defends the a4 pawn. So here bishop c1 was played, which I saw in the game. And here e4 is the critical move. The idea is, as I mentioned, to play knight e2 check, and in the end pick up the rook here on a1. So here king to g2, sidestepping this threat. And here there was two ways that I thought about going about this. So I calculated this earlier in the position when I played knight to c3. I saw the move king g2, and here I thought there were two ways of playing it. Either I could play knight e2, or I can play the move bishop or to threaten the knight e2 basic threatens this rook here, as well as the bishop here on c1, or I can play the move rook b1. Objectively speaking, knight e2 is the better move here. The reason being is it immediately cashes in on a material advantage. However, I thought that rook b1 was a bit more practical, because the reason being is that after knight e2, you'll see that I'm attacking this bishop as well as this rook, and there's actually no way for this rook to continue to defend this bishop because my rook controls the b1 square. I didn't think this was as good because after rook captures on a4 and knight captures on c1, I give white some counterplay here with rook a1 check. And after king f7, then maybe there's some rook a6 idea to target some weak pawns here. Of course, I always have the move bishop e5, but since I was a bit lower on time, I didn't really calculate further into the position. I just saw that position and just assumed that it wasn't as great. Alternatively, rook b1, you'll see that after rook captures on b1, knight captures on b1, takes, which will happen in the game. You'll see that I still maintain this a4 pawn, and you'll see that when I push it, I'll still be able to win a piece. And I thought that I had better chances there because also the rooks were off the board. And the closer I get to me only having a dark square bishop, as well as a knight versus a light square bishop, I thought the closer I would be able to win this game, because with the rooks on the board, there'd still be some complications. So after rook b1, knight takes, pawn takes, which will happen in the game. Here my opponent plays the move f3, trying to break out of the cage here that they put their king into. I take, king takes, and here I simply play the move a3. And now my opponent plays bishop captures on a3, which is the right decision. If you don't take and let me play a2, well, there's no way you're stopping my pawn from being able to queen, because my bishop here on f6 also patrols the long diagonal, and the bishop here on c1 can never get on this diagonal to prevent a1 equals queen. So after a3, bishop takes, knight takes, and here bishop to d3. The idea here is basically you're attacking my g6 pawn, and the other threat is that you're trapping my knight on the edge of the board. This is what I actually had missed, and this is why actually knight e2 is better, because here my knight actually gets stuck on the edge of the board, and I have to constantly worry a little bit about the fact that white can maybe sneak their king in and capture my knight on a3. However, after king f7, king to g5, I found a configuration which prevents my opponent from being able to go and capture my knight, because after bishop to e7, king to f3, and bishop to g5, this is the configuration I wanted to go for. The reason being is because you'll see that when white's king tries to approach here on d1 to try to get to my knight, you'll see that that is impossible, because this bishop cuts off this diagonal here, which is d2 and c1, and this knight also cuts off the c2 square, effectively forming a wall. So basically, if white's king tries to travel to d1 to get to my knight, it's impossible because both of these squares are protected. Alternatively, if white moves their bishop to try to get to my knight, you'll see that this bishop currently controls these two escape squares for my knight. So if the bishop ever moves off of this diagonal, let's say to f1, then I'll always be able to play knight b1 and knight to c3. And if the bishop moves on the other diagonal, let's say to e4, then you'll see the c4 pawn is hanging, and I'll be able to play knight takes c4. So basically, by playing the move bishop g5, I'm slowly forcing white into zugzwang, otherwise known as when white doesn't have a good move to make, and then basically they'll have to let my knight out for free. And basically, if white sticks to doing nothing, then at some point I'll play the move bishop to c1, play g5 so that my pawn's on a dark square, and then play king f6, king e5, and king d4 by way of opposition, and then I'll be able to win the game from there, because then I'll have access to the c4 pawn and I'll be able to play knight takes c4. So here, king to e4, I play king f6, g5 here, g4 here, I play bishop to c1. This also defends my knight in case of some random situation where my knight actually ends up being hanging or attacked by my opponent's king. Bishop to e2 here, I very simply, now I move my knight out of the way, but knight to c2. King to d3, I play my knight into d4. I'm trying to go for this trade because then I have an extra bishop and I would be completely winning. Bishop to d1, here I play king to e5. Bishop to a4, I play the move g5, locking my opponent's pawn here on the light square. And after king f5, I can maneuver my knight to be able to take this pawn. Bishop d7, king to f5. Bishop to b5, trying to go for complications after knight takes g4, pawn takes g4, which is still winning, but I went for the calmer option of simply capturing on g4. This generates winning chances very clearly. Bishop to d7, king to f4, now threatening g4, g3. Bishop to h3, I play the move g4. Bishop takes and king takes, and now this is very simply winning for black here. Black is up 2 pieces, and they'll be able to pick up these 2 pawns. And so slowly, I just maneuver my pieces, get them all safe on good outpost squares here. And then I very simply move my king in by way of opposition. Keep in mind here, my knight isn't actually capturable because my bishop here on e5 is giving a discovered check. Knight check, king back to c2, knight takes c4, king d1. And here, I'm very simply winning here, up 2 pieces, up 2 pawns. And I simply march my pawns in, create a bit of a mating net here. You'll see that this knight controls the a3 square. So white's king is stuck between the a1 and a2 squares here, and this king does a very nice job of preventing the king from being able to escape. So here I very simply play the move c3. The reason why I have to move the c pawn first before I push the d pawn is because in some positions, if I'm not careful, let's see after d3, king to a2 and d2, this is actually a stalemate, which is quite funny because this bishop takes away the a1 square now. So instead here I have to move this pawn to c3 first before I'm able to push the d pawn, because then the c3 pawn would block this bishop from being able to deliver stalemate. And then afterwards I play d3, d2, after d1 equals queen with check, which is very important because if I queen when the king is on a2, then that would also be stalemate. I queen with check after king a2, and queen to b1 is very simply checkmate. The a3 square is protected by the knight, and all the other squares are protected by the queen. So a very nice win over 2400. Long-time viewers for the past 3 months-ish might know that I have been quite tilted in the past 3 months. I've lost quite a bit of rating, and beating a 2400 was quite refreshing for me, as it shows at least I got some of my, at least I wasn't as tilted as I was before. And yeah, realistically speaking, a very nice game. Slowly squeezed my opponent, breaking through on the queen side and being able to pick up a couple of pawns, leading to this very nice final position. And yeah, hope you all enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.